Hey, what's up, you guys? Have you heard of the PNPT by TCM Security? If that's an exam you've been thinking about taking, well, then you're going to want to watch this video because I'll share my thoughts about the exam and maybe it'll help you better prepare. All right, let's take a look. In addition to making this video, I also went ahead and wrote up a blog post that kind of explains everything I'm going to talk about. If you'd rather just read it and go through the text, feel free to check out the link. It'll be down in the description. Okay, so I took the PNPT exam in July of 2021. I passed it on my first attempt, and honestly, I had a blast going through it. So I'm going to structure this in three different ways. We're going to talk about what the PNPT even is, a little bit about my background so you know who I am and what knowledge I might have had going into the exam. And then I'm actually going to give like a review, I guess, like where I share my experience, and then I also kind of give my opinions on things. And yeah, hopefully this helps you. If you're considering taking the exam, then this kind of is I'm hoping you'll take this as like a step towards preparing. So what is the PNPT? That's short for Practical Network Penetration Tester. It's a brand new certification exam. It's released by TCM Security, which if you've ever seen the Cyber Mentor on YouTube, Heath Adams, this is his company. It's his certification exam, and really the goal of it is to take the course content that he develops and his company develops and try to take all that material and provide a way for you to credit that you've learned the things taught in that material. So it's really a focus on network pen testing. Now, the content, while it's focused on network pen testing, there are some other items to it that kind of make it unique in the sense that you've got some OSINT, which I thought was pretty cool. I wish they did more of that, but we can talk about that later on. You will have to do an external network pen test where you compromise a host on the outside, and that's going to be your pivot point to pivot inside the network. From there, there's lots of Active Directory exploitation, a lot of lateral movement, with the ultimate goal being to compromise the domain controller and establish some sort of persistence in the environment. So these are all things that you need to be familiar with in order to be successful in the PNPT. An overview, you have 5 days to hack. Plus, you get an extra 2 days to write the report. So, honestly, this is a pretty stress free exam, in my opinion. Um, but also, I mean, I've got a bit of experience, so maybe, when I talk about my background, if you're a beginner, that may not be quite as laid back. But for someone like me, that was plenty of time, and it was no issue as far as like a stress level. There's also no tool limitations, so that's helpful, right? Because you can use things like Metasploit, you can use Vuln scanners, you can use Burp Pro, and so that's different than some other exams, and so it's kind of nice not having to worry about like, hey, is this tool allowed? Is that tool allowed? Whatever. You also get a second attempt for free, so that just saves you some money if you happen to fail, and there's no proctoring, so that could be good or bad. We'll talk about my opinions on that. Okay, so we talked about what the PNPT is at a very high level. Now, who the hell am I? So, as a student, I always knew I wanted to become a pen tester. I knew that at a young age. I even made a video that kind of talks about how I became a pen tester. So I'm not really going to go into too much depth about myself. But I started a 2-year degree right out of high school. Started going down a cybersecurity and networking path, and they taught a lot of things like A plus, Security plus, the CCNA track. But I didn't actually take any of those certifications. So when I graduated in 2016, I didn't even try any of the exams. I couldn't afford to, and I walked away without any certification. So I went through some of the courses, but I wasn't certified in anything. I mean, I had some like non-industry recognized certs that the school gave me. I did some FEMA training, but nothing that really helps you land a job and stands out on a resume. But anyway, once I graduated, I started working help desk. I started working at an MSP. I got super familiar with Active Directory, doing some system administration stuff, some network administration stuff. The MSP life is kind of brutal in the sense that it's like, they expect you to work 50-hour work weeks and you're always on call and stuff like that. But it's also super helpful for learning because you get to get exposed to so many different pieces of technology and you got to learn about each one of them. So it was a really great first, I guess, like, dive in the pool in the deep end for IT. So I quickly moved through the ranks of that. I was the lead on the help desk, and then I became a manager, and I started overseeing all of our technical services. And security was just kind of mixed into that, but it wasn't what I was doing full time. I was really doing a lot of heavy sysadmin, network admin stuff. So I learned a lot about how end users operate, and I learned a lot about what default configurations look like, which is all very helpful when you start pen testing, and especially when you get into network pen testing down the road. So in 2019, I had gone to DEF CON, and when I got back, that was my first time ever at DEF CON. And when I got back, that just really inspired me, to go after my passion of security, and try to chase down my dream of becoming a pen tester, because I kind of got comfortable at the life of the MSP, and I lost sight of like ever thinking I would ever be good enough to be a pen tester. So I kind of gave up on it a little bit. But I went to DEF CON. That changed, some of my thought processes, and then I actually came across the Cyber Mentors channel on YouTube, and he was sharing his story. He had a zero to hero course. So when I started seeing what he was doing online, it actually kind of inspired me a bit, and it made me realize that, if I was going to get into pen testing, it was going to be because I put in the work, and it's possible to do it. You just have to do it. You know what I mean? So I actually got a lot of inspiration from Heath, and I even had a couple phone calls with him where he kind of provided some mentorship to me, and he helped me take the leap to go ahead and go down the OSCP track. Now, fast forward almost 2 years later, I still haven't passed the OSCP certification exam, but because of that journey, I was able to land a pen testing internship in the summer of 2020. That turned into contract work, which eventually turned into full-time work. So I work now as a professional pen tester, and I've been doing it for about a year. And now I do things from network pen tests, like the PNPT covers, to web application pen testing, to social engineering engagements, and all that type of fun stuff. So that's a little bit about my background, where I came from, what I do. Why did I pick the PNPT? There are really two reasons why I picked the PNPT. The first was I wanted to support TCM security. I like what they're doing when it comes to trying to make education affordable, and like, a low barrier of entry for people who can't afford it. They have so much content online for free on YouTube, and then if you wanted to pay a little bit, $10 to $30, you'll be able to access a heap of information through their academy or through Udemy. So this isn't an ad for them or anything like that, but I do like what they're doing for the community, because when you compare that to some other big names in the industry, it almost feels like, the more you pay, it's almost like pay to win type thing. And I like that TCM Security is taking a different approach to that. Also, Heath inspired me, and he supported me going into it. Like, I don't think I would have ever taken the leap if it wasn't for having somebody there, as a mentor, and someone who said, look, you can do it. And so if it wasn't Heath, it might have been someone else, but he supported me coming into this, so I wanted to kind of give back now that I'm in a position to try to support him in something. Also, I wanted to just give myself a confidence boost. I wanted to accredit my own skills, because failing sucks. Like, if you've ever failed anything, especially a tough certification, it sucks. And we have a real issue in our industry where nobody thinks they're good at what they do. We all struggle with imposter syndrome, and I've got it pretty bad, honestly. I really do, I think, because I sometimes feel like, man, I'm not good enough to be making content, or I'm not good enough to actually be a pen tester, because there's so many other people that are much more talented than I am. And so when you fail the OSCP over and over again, like I have, that really just kind of helps solidify, like, dude, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong. So the PNPT was something for me that's like, look, this is really focused specifically into what I like to do. It kind of ties into my background as a sysadmin, as a network admin, and it's what I'm good at. So network pen testing is kind of my specialty. This exam was specifically supposed to be for that, so I knew that I would have a pretty good chance going in that I'd be successful, and I was. So that felt really good. Those were the two reasons I picked the PNPT. Okay, so let's talk about the exam. I know that's why you're here. So, I mean, just real quick disclaimer, keep in mind, everything I say here, This is all based out of my own bias. It's based out of my experience. All of this is my opinion. You will likely have a different opinion. You're probably going to have a different experience. You might think differently of TCM security. That's all fine. Like, honestly, like that's cool. I'd like to hear about your thoughts and your experience too. So feel free to reach out to me. We could chat about it. But this is my experience going into the exam. So here's kind of the timeline. I decided to start working on the exam after work on a Friday, which was July 2nd. That was the 4th of July holiday weekend here in the United States. So I knew if I needed the extra time, I already had the Monday off after the weekend. So, I would have basically Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, all day Monday to tackle the exam. And then I would still have a couple days after work if I needed it. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start Friday after work. I was able to complete all of the technical portion, all of the hacking portion of the exam on the afternoon of July 4th. And that was basically me spending, I don't know, a few hours. I would say probably 6 hours Friday night, basically all day Saturday. And then by the afternoon on that Sunday, I was done. I had the full initial compromise. The full compromise of the domain controller. So I guess it took me, about 48 hours or so. And then I was able to whip out the report pretty quickly. And I got that submitted that same night on July 4th. And I was able to enjoy the holiday, sort of. I mean, we we had some crazy heat weather here in Portland. So we had firework bans and stuff. So we were really going to do a whole bunch. But anyway, I submitted the report. And then I had the debrief call the very next day. That was quick and easy, 15 minutes on the phone. By the end of that call, I received the notice that I had passed. So honestly, the whole turnaround time on the exam was really quick when you compare that to some of the others that are, closer to a week or two before you even know if you passed. So the structure of the exam is really broken into like 4 pieces, in my opinion. You've got the recon, the OSINT, and then you use the information gathered to do an external network assessment. You use that to pivot into the internal network, where eventually you laterally move and you have a complete compromise of the environment and you establish some sort of persistence. So those are kind of like the 4 pieces to the exam. The recon, it was the smallest part. I really enjoyed that they added that in because there's some public information gathering you have to do. But I wish there was more of that because that is such a core thing that's necessary when you're doing real engagements that it would be cool to see that, in more depth in an exam. Also, yeah, I mean, it was just quick and easy. I finished that in about 30 minutes. Then I used that information that I gathered to perform the external network. So basically what happens is you get sent an email at the start of your exam where you have a VPN. You connect to the VPN connection, and from there you have 2 subnets that you're looking at. One's external that you can directly talk to. The other one's internal that you can't directly talk to. So you'll do some external reconnaissance on that external subnet. You'll find whatever amount of hosts might exist, and then it's honestly kind of similar to what you would see in Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. I wouldn't call it to the same degree as OSCP, but using some of the basic external methodology, you'll be able to compromise one of the hosts on the external network, and you'll use that as your pivot into the internal network. So that probably took me, I don't know, anywhere between 1 to 3 hours. I didn't track how long each step of it took me, but I'm thinking back, I think it was just a few hours to finish the external assessment. From there, I pivoted on the inside, and that's the bulk of the exam. That's where you're going to spend most of your time. There's multiple machines here that you have to compromise. But one thing I enjoyed about the exam is it's really logical. Like, you'll compromise a system, and then you'll just know that this is the next system I need to hit. It's the way they outline it makes it feel really logical, and it's like step by step. You kind of understand the path you're supposed to take. It almost feels like you're telling a story in a way, but maybe that's just me. Also, they added a bunch of like comedic bits throughout the exam that I thought was funny, especially when you're like kind of stressed out because you're doing an attack and it isn't working. Having that comedic relief is nice because it reminds you like, okay, this isn't that serious. Take a step back, and go back at it. Um, Heavy Active Directory and lateral movement. Make sure you understand what Active Directory is, the difference between local and domain accounts, how you would abuse, what tools you might use to move laterally. Make sure you have some of that understanding going into it. I would say this exam focuses more on abusing misconfigurations or even default configurations rather than abusing like unpatched exploits. Like the OSCP is really heavy on, hey, what version is the software running? Okay, let me go dump that into exploit-db. Oh, okay, let's compare the two. Sweet, there's this exploit code. Let me modify it and I'm going to run it. I'm not saying there isn't any of that here in the PNPT, but that to me didn't seem to be the main focus. The focus was, hey, what misconfigurations might a sysadmin make and how can we abuse that? Eventually, once you move throughout the environment, you're going to have the domain controller extremely or fully compromised. And that's your final objective. You want to get to the domain controller. You get there and you win. But you do need to establish some sort of persistence long term, and they want to see that on the exam. You won't pass unless you can do that. So that was kind of my experience. I finished that again within like 48 hours. So how would I rate the exam? These are the three areas that I would say where the PNPT wins. The number one area, affordability. There's nothing else out there that I found that can really have you test your skills and make sure you know what you're doing, like the PNPT. Yeah, you can do hack the box, and you can do try hack me, and that feels good when you hack a machine and you get the points and you capture the flag. Like that all, it helps, but you don't walk away with any sort of real certification. And I think that this here is really nice because as of the time I'm recording this, the PNPT is only $299, and you can get the training that goes with it for a max of an extra $100. So compare that to OSCP that starts at like 1,200. Or the INE subscription, which is $750 a year currently, plus like I think $200 to even sit for an exam attempt, right? So the PNPT affordability, hands down, it totally wins in that department. Practicality, 10 out of 10. It was all hands on keyboard, no multiple choice, no nothing like that, which is good, which is awesome, right? Like you take other exams like the CEH, right, or maybe even I haven't seen the Pen Test Plus, but I'm pretty sure Pen Test Plus doesn't have a practical to it, and so when it comes to pen testing, it's all about the hands-on keyboard. So I love that this exam is all of that. There's some realism to it. And I think that realism is also a big winning factor. When you look at an exam like the OSCP, it's not realistic. You have limitations that don't really exist in the real world. You're looking at systems that don't really exist in the real world. They don't go together. You're given 5 random machines that have nothing to do with each other, and they very capture the flaggy type. In this environment, all of the systems were there for a reason, and they were tied together through Active Directory, and they were all a part of the same corporate infrastructure. So it felt real. However, I'd only rate it like a 7 out of 10 because there were definitely things on it that didn't feel real. Like, for example, when you compromise a system and you're looking at what software is installed, it didn't make any sense to have some of the software installed that was on there. I think that they did that to kind of throw you off, add rabbit holes, and try to make it more difficult. But honestly, like there were some times where it's like, why would this be here? Especially when you look at what does this company do? What is this person who uses this computer? What is their job position? It never felt like I was actually compromising someone in accounting and I would see accounting software. You know what I mean? So for that reason, it definitely made you understand that, okay, this isn't as realistic as it could be. So that's why I knocked it down a little bit on the realism on that side. So where does the PNPT lose? And it does lose in a few areas. The difficulty, I put that as a loss, but that was just because I was trying to find an extra con to talk about. The difficulty, I would rate it like a 6.5 out of 10. So it's not the most difficult exam that there is, but it's also not easy. Like it will be stressful at times, and you will feel stuck, and things won't work, and you'll get caught in rabbit holes. Like they did a good job at balancing difficulty, I think, because the target audience on this is like a beginner to intermediate, middle level pen tester. And I think that if you have experience pen testing, you're probably gonna be just fine going through the exam without much stress. If you don't have experience pen testing and you're looking to get into the field, I think this is a good certification for you. You may want to consider the EJPT first. I haven't done the ECPPT yet, but I imagine this is probably close to being, the same difficulty. But again, I haven't done that exam. Proctoring. So I think that might be problematic as we move forward in the future. I understand why they don't proctor. Proctoring is super invasive. It feels weird having someone watch you. It just adds, in some cases, like unnecessary complications to the exam. But I'm curious how that's going to affect the credibility in the long run. Because I'm not sure what they're doing currently to try to mitigate people pretending that they're taking the exam and someone else is really doing it. Or if someone were to post online, this is a walkthrough of the machines, this is how you complete the exam, or a report gets leaked, or whatever, how are they going to know if someone looked through that or not? So I think without proctoring, you risk the long-term credibility, and I think that's just a conversation that needs to be had internally at TCM, and I'm sure it is. If you introduce proctoring, that's going to introduce additional costs, which brings the price up and could take down that pro of it being affordable. So I totally get it's not a tough one, but that is something that I would consider maybe a con for the long-term credibility. Recognition right now is also problematic. You can find some jobs that have the PNPT listed if you do a search on like Monster or Indeed, but there's not a lot of them. And that's not really their fault, I don't think. I think that's just something that takes time. So again, you have to have solid credibility. You have to have people actually taking the certification and talking about the certification. And in the long run, recognition will start to build. So fast forward maybe 2-3 years, maybe this will be a different story and it will be an industry recognized certification. As of today, I'm not convinced that it's going to get you through HR. However, I do think that if you are able to get through HR another way, maybe through another certification or by doing other things like posting content online or writing a blog, once you get to the interview and you're talking with someone who's technical, if you have the PNPT, that proves that you have the baseline understanding to be a network pen tester, and so it's still going to assist you in the interview process, because you can at least, even if you have no experience pen testing, you can talk about your experience in the PNPT exam environment, and you'd be able to prove that you know your stuff and you know what you're talking about. So for that reason, I would still recommend this exam to anyone who's looking to get into pen testing or to accredit their Active Directory skills. So closing thoughts. Let's wrap this up. What are some of my what are some of my FAQs that people have asked me since I've taken this exam? First one, what resources do I need to prepare? Honestly, TCM does a good job at making the material that they provide cover what it is that they cover in the exam. I don't like if you take his PEH course, the Practical Ethical Hacking course, that honestly is going to cover 80% of what you need to pass this exam. I actually had that course up throughout most of the exam, and I was just rewatching some of the videos because it really helped you. You couldn't copy the syntax directly, but as long as you understood the attacks that were being performed in that course, then the logic behind those could be tweaked and you would be able to make it applicable in the exam. So I really do believe they did a good job at making it to where you follow through with their course material and you don't really need much else. If you were to do anything else, I would focus on anything that's like Active Directory based. So spin up your own AD lab, maybe try some AD based machines on Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, and you get a good baseline understanding of those, you'll be just fine. How does the PNPT compare to OSCP? So I talked briefly about that earlier in the video, and honestly, that's a question that we could probably record a whole hour-long video about all on its own. But in short, they're very different exams. I think the PNPT has its pros and cons, obviously, and so does the OSCP. I think that difficulty-wise, OSCP is higher on the list for me. But again, I have more of that network sysadmin background, whereas someone who maybe doesn't have that real world experience but has done a ton of hack the box machines, I think they would fly through the OSCP without a problem, and they might struggle with the Active Directory component, right? So it really depends on what your background is when it comes to that difficulty level, because it's just two very different skill sets. So I don't really know if you can compare the two certifications. I'm just going to leave it at that. And if you guys want me to expand on that, let me know. What additional tips can I give? Honestly, that is kind of just the same tips I'd give anybody taking any exam. You want to just take breaks often, stay calm, just remember that failure is okay. So if you take the pressure off of, oh my god, I gotta pass, I gotta pass, I gotta pass, it makes you realize, like, okay, it's easier to stay calm when something's not working. It's easier to remind yourself it's okay to step away and clear your brain, clear your mind. And again, with this exam being 5 days, there's not a ton of pressure to rush through it, and you get a second attempt for free. So there's really not a ton of pressure to even pass that first time. So just stay calm is my is my biggest tip that I can give you. All right, guys. Well, that's a review of the exam, and I hope you found some helpful information in this. Sorry that it ran so long, but I hope that that provided value. So, if there are any other questions that you might have about the PNPT or some topics you want me to expand on, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.